Hey folks, this is Jeremy again. Gonna make part 6 installment on the Baja boat build. Today decided I'm going to tackle this other head, and I've kind of had a change of course. I was originally going to reuse the valves out of those old Edelbrock heads, if you've seen in the first video. Well, I decided to go ahead and install all new valves, and the reason being, I didn't have any trouble with the first head I did, but the second Edelbrock head, when I took it apart, somebody had changed a handful of the valves in it, and they were not the same. Let me see. I got the valves right here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. They had put what I call just regular old jobber valves in it. Let me see if I can find an intake. All right. Oh, two exhaust. There we go. These valves here are the valves those Edelbrocks came with from the factory. And you notice that they are what they call a neck down stem. And they had, someone had gone through and replaced 4 or 5 of these valves with what you see is a straight stem, a jobber valve I call it. You also notice on the edge, it's really hard to tell, but it's kind of got a rounded edge on the valve face also, slight. Well, if you look at the jobber valve, they're kind of crude, and it's a very sharp edge here. I don't know what the weight difference is. I'm not sure how they would affect performance, probably not all that much in flow. But a couple of these jobber valves, if you notice the stem, I don't know which one it was for sure, but a couple of them had some really bad valve stem wear, guide wear on the valve itself. Whereas the factory Edelbrock valves still look perfectly fine. With that being said, I was thinking about just buying enough valves just to replace these, but instead, after going and researching some of the parts I had, I was having trouble getting the installed height of these springs. I did have my valve springs checked on a machine or a tester to make sure the spring rates were good. They all checked out okay. These are factory Edelbrock springs. They're just a single spring with a dampener inside, 1/4/6 diameter. Can't remember the part number. But anyway, the recommended installed height for these springs is 1.8 inches. And in that other head, I was coming up a little shy, kind of around 174, 175, which that typically ain't a big deal other than the installed seat pressure went up by about 10 pounds. Instead of 120, it was at 130. And that's the pressure on the seat with the valve closed. That's acceptable for the flat tappet cam the way it was. The only thing I was kind of getting close on is with my cam and my ratio of my rockers. When these things got compressed to full lift, I was getting kind of close on the coil bind tolerance. You want a minimum of 60 thousandths of clearance, and I was pushing that. It was still within, but it was getting close. So my machine shop friend had a set of brand new Urson valves, intake and exhaust. They are 100 thousandths longer than stock. So they're going to change the installed height of the spring a little bit and get it to where now, before I was just running the spring seat and that was it, like that, and I was having, there was variances in the heights. Not enough I didn't think was going to be a big deal, but it was not perfect. So now what I'm going to do is with these taller valves that I'm going to be using, I can now have more than adequate spring seat or spring height. Now I'm going to have to actually use shims Here's an example of a shim. And these go, let me turn this head over here. These go like this, and then your spring seat on top, and then your spring and retainer. Now with this setup, I am going to have to use shims, and now I am getting closer to where I need to be, which is the 180. And here are the measurements I took for this head. And so far what I've coming up with is my number 1 cylinder with the shims I put together, a 30 thousandths, a 60 thousandths. On each one of these, I'm coming up with a 179 installed height and a 1775 installed height. My machine shop said that I need to keep them within 15 thousandths of each other from high to low. So as you see there, that's right at 15 thousandths. So that's going to be acceptable. Shims come in 15, 30, and 60 thousandths. And without actually doing machine work, you're probably not going to get perfect on that 180. And there is a tolerance. And like I said before, I was at 174, 175. And right now, this is my tightest, which is 1775. So I'm getting a lot better, and I think I'm going to have a better end result. This might change my push rod length, which I do have a set of push rods I plan on using, but I'm not going to kid myself. They might not be right for the setup. I'm going to have to get it put together, put them in, and then see how the roller tip ends up riding on the valve and get it set up right. I might end up having to order another set of push rods, which is okay, I guess. I think while I'm here, I'll show you what I'm doing to run these valves in. And I'm talking about running the valves in. What I'm talking about running these valves in is actually lapping them in. I don't have a lapping tool, but I do have a piece of rubber hose. And when I'm talking about lapping a valve in, let me get a new valve here. I know, if you've been watching these, you know by now that I'm not ever very prepared to get a valve out of the package. These are very impromptu. I don't have a cameraman or a camera stand. I don't even have a camera. This is on my phone. All right, here is a new exhaust valve. Boy, shiny, pretty. Now after it's lapped in, which I've done this one already, you see that kind of a ground finish there? Well, that is caused, hold on, let me show you. Here is some unfinished seats, and I know the reflection, this camera has trouble focusing. Now here, okay, there you go. Now you can kind of see, that ground lapped finish right there. And how you get that, and what you're doing there is, these seats are machined in, pressed in, and then kind of a rough valve job done on them. And these valves are just run through a machine and put an angle on them to match the angle that's on these seats. But they're not mated to each other. And when you do a valve job, and this is the reason I've decided to do this myself, because if you buy some cheap heads off of eBay, they're not going to lap the seats in. They're going to put in the raw valve like this into a raw seat like that, assemble it. They're not even going to check valve spring height. They're going to just get a run-of-the-mill valve spring and throw it together. No shims. They're not going to check anything. Make sure it's where it needs to be. So what you go is go down to your parts store and you get what's called a valve grinding compound. And you know what? I'm just going to do one here for you. Get these junk valves out of the way here. Make sure I'm not doing any good ones. Get all these junk valves out of the way. Okay, so we're going to take this valve. Sorry. Then we're going to load this valve up with compound, and basically you're just going to get a little carried away there. Like so. I'm going to even it out a little bit. Probably don't need this much. I'm getting a little carried away. Like I said, maybe I should invest in some better camera equipment. With a fancy stand and something that ain't all wobbly gobbly like me. Okay, and then you just need to get you a piece of rubber hose that fits over this valve stem and fits tight. Okay. Now, where am I at? I'm over here, 135. We're on exhaust on number 5 cylinder. All right. Drop it in. Come around this other side. Okay. Prop my phone up again here. Boy. All right, you kind of see that valve. Now I'm gonna come in here. Don't have to force. Now they do make a wooden handle with suction cups on it where you can just suction cup it to the face of this valve. And then you do some spinning action with it, and that's how you're gonna lap your valves. Well, I am not that fancy. And I don't do this all the time, so I don't have one of those. But this rubber hose will work. And what you're going to do, tap it down, and then you're going to spin this in your hand. And you're going to do it for just a minute, and you'll notice the sound will change. It'll start to sound and feel less gritty. It'll start to feel smoother. And while you're doing it, you're going to change position of the valve in the seat. Kind of slowly rotating it. And what this is doing is mating the two surfaces together so they seal better. Now you notice the sound changed. Got a lot smoother. All right, now let's see what we got. Gonna pull this off. Grab the phone up here. All right. All right, let's see here. I'm going to wipe this valve off so we can see what we've done. That light definitely doesn't help. Well, maybe you can kind of see it there. You see it's got that machined edge now. Ground in. You want to make sure that it's centered and the same all the way around. You don't want no thick or thin. I guess the only way you'd really get thick or thin is if your valve guides are really wore out or your seat's not put in right. That looks pretty good. Now we'll look at the seat that we just did. All right, we'll wipe it out. Now, if you're a professional machine shop, machinist, and you don't like the amateur way I'm doing this, well, I'm sorry. I'm working with what I got. I've done this way on a couple sets of heads, and I haven't had any trouble. Maybe it's not right. I don't know. Now you can kind of see, and you want to look all the way around on that chamber, or that valve seat, and make sure that it's even all the way around. And it is. Anyway, that's what we got going. Now once I get all these lapped in, I'll go one by one and re-go through the valve heights. And what I'm going to do is put, how you do that is you're going to put a valve seat in, then you're going to slide a valve up through, and then you have this what's called a spring height micrometer. And when the valve's up through there, you put that on there. You put a retainer on top. Then with the valve up in there, then you put your locks in place. There's your locks. With the locks in place, you pull up on the valve and turn this down and turn it till it's snug. And oh, when you set, you want to set the keeper. You want to set the retainer in the keepers. Make sure everything is locked up tight up against the valve. Pull it up tight, and then you'll want to run this down until you get your measurement, which is right there. And when you get your measurement, record it down, and from that you'll come up with a number. And for example, when I did this earlier for that particular valve, I come up with 1.88. And then with the 60 thousandths and the 30 thousandths shim, so 90 thousandths added to it, I got it down to 1.790, which is right on, well, not right on the money, but pretty dang close. And then I take the micrometer back out and assemble the head. And well, that's all, folks. Have a good day.